It's interesting that you bring up the idea of social media and different types of platforms because in every case, intellectual property does play a role. It's just different types of intellectual property protecting different types of ideas.
Hello, I am John Brink and I am podcasting on the Brink from downtown Prince George, British Columbia, Canada. And for all those people watching us from around the world, they say, we know where Canada is and we heard about British Columbia. It's on the west coast. And so we heard about the big city there, Vancouver. Where is Prince George? Well, Prince George is 500 miles north of Vancouver, or for our friends in Europe, 800 kilometers, and that puts us physically in the center of British Columbia. Northwest, east, south, big province. But also in Prince George, about 85,000 people population, and it is beautiful trees, lots of nature. We have black bears, grizzly bears, caribou, deer, you name it, we have it. Within 50 miles of Prince George, we have 100 lakes. It is nature's paradise. Now, Richard, I need a commitment from you. Don't tell too many people about it because otherwise they all want to come here. I'm just kidding. So today we have a very important guest. His name is Richard Gearhart. And Gearhart has a very interesting bio. He is an award-winning speaker, a TV expert guest, a national syndicated radio show host, and an attorney. He started his own law firm, Gearhart and Associates, and has been very active speaking on all kinds of different medias. And I can go through the bio, but it goes on, and we'll talk about it as we start. Richard, welcome to the show. And share with us your background and your operating, your education, and then obviously your amazing career and what you're doing today.
Oh boy, I always feel a little uncomfortable talking about myself in those kinds of ways. John, thank you for the amazing introduction and really happy to be here on the program. I have kind of an unusual career. I never really took a traditional career path, and I like it that way. I like trying new things and being open to new experiences. So when I graduated from college, I went to work in the chemical industry for a few years and then decided that I wanted to go to law school. So I went to law school at Case Western Reserve University in Ohio. And after I completed my studies there, I went to work in Switzerland. I pursued a
Wow.
degree in international law from the Graduate Institute of International Studies. And I also worked for a pretty Tony law firm called Jones Day Revis and Pogue in their Geneva office. And there I had really just an amazing experience. Geneva, of course, is an international center.
Yeah.
And through the school that I attended, I was able to meet lots and lots of different people from all sorts of different backgrounds, from different countries. And I became something of an internationalist, I guess. And if you have never, if you're an American, or if you've never spent any time outside of your country, no matter where you are from, spending time in a different country really provides an interesting perspective on your country that you wouldn't necessarily expect. So, being from the United States and then living in Europe, I had the opportunity to really hear different views about the United States, and it was quite an awakening for me, but also a positive experience. And I really learned, I think, how to work with people from other cultures and appreciate different points of view. And so it was just an amazing, eye-opening experience for me for the time that I spent there. I came back to the United States after about 3 years and decided that I wanted to practice intellectual property law. And I started working in intellectual property law, and I found out after about 2 weeks, it was absolutely the perfect fit for my personality and my skills. And honestly, it's been over 30 years now, 35 years that I've practiced in this area, and I've never regretted it. I continue to learn more as I work in the field. And I highly recommend it to anybody who has the aptitude both for technical things and legal things, which is what's required for an intellectual property lawyer. And so, but it's served me very, very, very well, and I find the practice very, very interesting. And so
So
I work.
at what point did you start Gearhart and Company Laws, the
Uh,
company
so
that you founded?
so it's been about 18 years ago.
Okay.
I progressed through the corporate world. I ended up heading up the intellectual property function for Novartis Pharmaceuticals here in the United States. And then after that, I decided to open my own shop. And so Gearhart Law has been in an existence now for 18 years. We have over 5,000 clients that we've helped with their intellectual property needs. And I am so proud to be working with an amazing team of attorneys and staff. It's just a great place to be.
Where are you physically located with your company, Richard?
Our headquarters are in Summit, New Jersey, but we're remote. So we have people in New Jersey, in New York, different states. One of my partners is in Israel. So we have a truly global practice. And I love it. I like to think of my work here as my canvas, right?
Right.
I get to be create and create the kind of life and the kind of practice that I want. And so it's very stimulating.
So all the people watching us, and if I look at it from my perspective, I'm in Canada, obviously, so I'm very familiar with the United States, similarities between the United States and Canada in terms of structure of legal firms, likely. So what we think about is in law, for most people, is that you have all kinds of different types of laws. You have civil law, you have criminal law, and then obviously other specialties likely again on both sides. You can be a prosecutor, you can be, a lawyer defending accused in criminal laws, civil law lawsuit, obviously specializing in a whole lot of different things, including intellectual law. And can you share with us what really is intellectual law? What could it
So
possibly be?
sure, that's a great question, and people are very interested in intellectual property. It's the law of ideas, and so it's property. The word property is in the phrase intellectual property, obviously. And it's the law of ideas. And so you're treating ideas like property. And so you're trying to protect those ideas. So uh, the fundamental idea behind intellectual property is that by giving property creators protection for certain periods of time, it encourages innovation. So in the world of patents, uh, patents protect technologies, ideas from inventors. They protect products or software
Products, software, yeah, okay.
or medicine. And so those types of technologies are generally protected by patents. And patents.
Example now, Microsoft, Apple, uh, Amazon, a number of those major companies likely have people involved from a legal perspective in terms of intellectual property.
Oh, absolutely. They are, those larger technology companies are some of the biggest patent filers on the planet. And they routinely top the list of the most active patent filers. So, absolutely. Um,
Now, the other thing
and
that, yeah, sorry, go ahead, Richard.
no, I was going to say those companies invest a lot of money in developing new products, and so some of the, so they want to maintain a competitive advantage, and they do that by filing patents.
And then the other thing that people would likely wonder about is saying that, so you are registered legally as a lawyer in the United States, and here it means that if you are registered as a lawyer in, say, British Columbia, you cannot really practice law in the province next to us, Alberta, Saskatchewan, Ontario, Quebec. I presume, incorrectly maybe, that in the United States it's the same. How can you then represent an interest in, say, France, Holland, Germany, or whatever for your client in the United States?
Well, that's a great question, and the short answer is I can't. So we do have a lot of clients that do want intellectual property portfolios on an international basis, and so part of our system is that we hire the attorney in France, and they go ahead and they refile the document that we filed in the United States, and they pursue it there through the French Patent Office. And so uh, part of our job is to work with other attorneys across the globe to help our clients pursue their intellectual property interests in whatever countries that they want to pursue them in. And likewise, we also work with European clients and clients from China, from Japan, from Canada, who want to protect their property in the United States. And so those agents send their intellectual property to us, and we help their clients pursue the patents in the United States. So there's a whole international system of intellectual property, and the the steps that I mentioned for patents are also very similar for trademarks. Trademarks are different from patents in that trademarks protect brands. So that protect the name of the product or the name of a company. And those trademarks can also be filed internationally under essentially the same system that patents are used to protect, technologies.
Okay,
Uh,
now my friends watching us, I presume, are asking the question, oh, okay, that is interesting. I understand then from Apple, Microsoft, Amazon, those kind of people, that they want to protect that. But that's products mainly. But how about Zuckerberg and Facebook? How about TikTok? How about Elon Musk and X or Twitter? Or go on and on and on and on. And what happens there?
that's a good question because it's a different type of technology. It's different types of ideas. It's a little less tangible than, say, a new coffee pot that you might protect with a patent, right? So, believe it or not, Mark Zuckerberg and Facebook, they do have patents too. Were able to protect some of their software through patents. So some aspects of the business are protectable that way. Another type of protection that comes into play when you're dealing with content is copyright. So blog posts, videos, all of those uh, artistic creations. That's the way they're kind of referred to in the world of copyright. Those artistic expressions are protected using copyrights. And for example, Facebook and Twitter, they all have very specific policies about how content can be shared among users. Copyright also controls what content you can take from outside the platform and use within the platform, and what kind of content that you can take from within the platform and put outside the platform. And so copyright has a fairly complicated set of rules that governs how content is used. And there is one more type of intellectual property that I can reference, and that is trade secrets. And trade secrets are less frequently relied on, but trade secrets are secrets that provide a competitive advantage for the owner. But in order for it to be a trade secret, it has to be kept secret. So most of these companies will have things that they've worked out that give them a competitive advantage in the business world, but they don't make that information known publicly, and they keep it as a trade secret. So it's interesting that you bring up the idea of social media and different types of platforms, because in every case, intellectual property does play a role. It's just different types of intellectual property protecting different types of ideas.
So the interesting part about podcasting and media is that I'm sitting in Prince George, British Columbia, Canada. You're sitting in your office in somewhere in the United States, your head office likely. And so
Mhm.
I'm is what happens here in Canada is that in British Columbia, we have, and in Prince George, we have all kinds of lawyers, and they say, if you have this, that issue, come see us, we'll give you advice, and then from there, and then you can then decide if you want to hire us. So I found the best lawyer that I can think of on an intellectual property, likely globally, and he's sitting right in front of me. He's answering my questions for free. So, so
Oh, wait, you're going to get a bill after this
I
podcast.
hope so. I hope so. So, Richard, there we have this fun fella. His name is Peter, hypothetically speaking, and he has this crazy idea that he wants to start a platform, a global platform. He has these great ideas about it. He thinks it will work this way, that way, and the other way, and I think it is going to grow and blah, blah, blah. What is the
I'm
first
ready.
thing?
Yeah.
What is the first thing that he should be doing other than finding the best lawyer that you can find that understands intellectual property, in particular as it relates to the global market?
Well, I mean, I can certainly answer that question. I think, John, you would have as much positive input on that as I would. I usually like to encourage people to have some sort of business plan before they get started. Whether intellectual property is going to play a role in the company or how big a role it's going to play depends on the type of technology. It depends on your strategy, whether you will want a long-term strategy. I mean, some businesses like the lumber business, for example, that you were involved in,
Yeah,
uh, may not really have a lot of intellectual property associated with it if you're a
exactly.
distributor.
Yeah,
And so in that case, maybe the intellectual property piece is not so important. Maybe it's just a trademark.
right.
But assuming that you have a business plan and you're committed to moving forward with the business, I do suggest talking with an intellectual property professional early in the game so that you understand a few things. Number one, you want to make sure that the business name is available and that somebody else isn't already using the name that you would like to use. And so if you talk with an intellectual property lawyer, they'll be able to do a search and find out, is the name available? If you are going to do a global business, like you're suggesting our friend Peter, I think was his name, is going
Yeah,
to do, then you might want to check and make sure that that name is going to be generally available in most countries, right? And so that I think is pretty important because if you start using a name that somebody else is using and they have a trademark on that name, they can stop you from using that name. And we have seen this uh, far too many times with clients who start a business and maybe they're entrepreneurs and it's just a startup and they get going after 2 or 3 years and then they get a letter from somebody in a different part of the country and they say, hey, you're using our name for the same business that we're in, and they are threatened with a lawsuit. And so
That's right.
then they have a very difficult situation because they may have to change their name after investing in 3 years of branding, or they could end up getting into a big legal fight and spending lots of money on lawyers, which is never fun. I mean, lawsuits are awful. You want to avoid them at all costs, especially if you're a small company.
Yeah.
They're very financially draining. They drain your time. They're stressful, uh,
Unpredictable.
unpredictable. Absolutely. And as a business owner, you don't want to be involved in this. But if you look early on in the game and you find out what names are available, then you can avoid all that. And that's what we recommend.
Do your homework right at the start. It kind of always reminds me of an amazing success story, Jeff Bezos, that started Amazon. But Amazon did not start as Amazon initially, as I understand it. He had a name that called Cadavro, and the lawyer said to him that when he already had that name for quite a number of months or so, they said this maybe is not a good idea because it reminds people of a cadaver of a dead body. So then he probably did the same as a lot of other people do, is say, okay, I have to find a name. So find a name that starts with an A. So he then chose Amazon. And so hence Amazon, and the rest is history. I'm trying to get him on I had a VP of Amazon on my podcast. I tried to get Jeff on my podcast, but he hasn't replied to my request. I don't know why. But
Jeff, you're out there.
If you know him, tell him, get on my podcast. Okay, so I'm reading your bio, so I'm asking you another question here. What are the 5 secrets of a successful entrepreneur?
What are the 5 secrets of a successful entrepreneur? I think number 1 is you got to have passion, drive, and energy. And I think that's number 1. I think that that's number 1. Number 2 is I think you have to understand how money works, and you have to kind of just get the idea of making a profit. And it's funny how I meet with clients all the time who are starting new businesses, but you have to understand that you have to generate more revenue than what you spend. It sounds basic, but knowing your numbers, having a plan, understanding the cost of things, the cost of doing business, all of those things I think are absolutely fundamental. Another piece is resilience. I think anybody who's been in the business world, I mean, it's an overused term. I know,
Not really.
but you have to roll with the punches. Not every day is going to be a great day, and your journey to the top may not be a straight line. You may have some ups and downs along the way, right?
Against all odds. This is not about how successful John is, but going through all the ups and downs for 50 years, so yeah.
And honestly, I wonder too, I guess I wouldn't have traded my journey for anything so far, but I often look back at it and say, geez, if I knew I was going to go through all of that stuff, I'm not sure I would have signed up for this. I'm glad I did, but there was a little bit of ignorance there on my part, and maybe too much optimism.
For me, it was the other way, is that I just tell you just a little bit about my background. And obviously, you are good at your profession. So before you got into this podcast, I'm sure you kind of looked up, who is this guy, to a certain extent,
Yeah.
because that would be you. And so I was born in 1940, at the beginning of the Second World War. My parents got married. They were in love. They got married, in 1938, and they had very quickly a boy and a girl. And the world was paradise because he had a beautiful house. My dad was working on a career. And then what happened? Adolf Hitler decided to take over Europe, and as a dictator. My dad was drafted into the Dutch army, and the last they heard from him was seen in Rotterdam just before it was bombed. And thousands of people died. For 5 years, she would not know if he lived or died. And so she was pregnant with me, had the kids, and and so I was born November the 1st, 1940. But the first thing that I remember, Richard, was when I was 3.5, 4 years old. We lived in the northeastern part of Holland, about 10, 15 minutes from the border. And I even still today remember hundreds of planes, bombers overhead of the Allied forces bombing the northeastern part of Germany, where all the factories were making war equipment. And so what we would do in the evening, we would go outside on the deck outside to look at the air, not because it was so beautiful, but it was safer outside than inside. And in the distance we would see the sky being red of the cities being bombed, and like Bremen, Hamburg, Kiel, and all those places and that touched on the North Sea. And then the next thing that I remember is the hunger winter, or the hunger period of 1944, when Hitler turned off all the food supply to Holland, and a lot of the young people did not live through that, or the older people. And we as kids, I was then 4.5 years old, 4.5 years old, my brother, my sister, and myself, every morning we would take gunny sacks, go into the railroad yards and pick up anything edible and burnable. And I remember that well, and even still today I can feel the feeling of hunger in my body, and the cold, and so that is nearly 80 years ago. And then the thing that I remember, we were liberated by the Canadian Army April the 12th, 1945, and by the Canadian Army that had landed in June of 1944 in Normandy. They pushed through France, Belgium, then through Holland, the west side, and pushed the Germans, back through northeastern Holland, where we lived, back to Germany. And things got pretty tough in around us. Saw far too much that we should not have seen. And, but the Canadian Army that liberated us, I was so impressed by it that I always knew from the time that I was 4.5, 5 years old, I would go to the land of my heroes, Canada. I was going to go when
how you ended up in Canada?
Yeah. So
okay.
I was going to go when I was 17, and my parents wouldn't let me. And then I went when I was 23. The other part about me is academically, I'm not a success story. I failed grade 3 and I failed grade 7 3 times. And then they said, what are we going to do with this guy? And other people said, well, send him to the mentally challenged school.
Well, why was that though? I mean, what happened there? I mean, I mean, you're obviously a super smart person, right? So 3rd grade,
What happened is that I found out likely what happened after I came to Canada in July of 1965, and I came to Canada, and I wanted to start from nothing, to prove to myself precisely what you said, is that I felt I was no less than the other people. But kids can be very hard on each other. All the friends that I had when I failed grade 7 3 times, they went on to go to college, university, and I became a laborer. I'm proud of that today, but then I wasn't necessarily. But I was a happy guy. So I wanted to start with nothing, went to Canada in 1965, and then couldn't speak the language, didn't know a soul, didn't have a job. So I landed in Montreal, took the train across Canada to Vancouver, went to the immigration office. Fortunately, there was a German fellow that I couldn't speak English, that I could speak German, and I told him I wanted to build a lumber mill. And he said, go to Prince George. That's 60 years ago.
I mean, that's where the lumber is, right?
That's where the lumber is. I came off the bus here. I can still see the bus station here, where I'm sitting now. And I had my suitcase, 3 books, 2 sets of clothes, and I counted my money at least 3 times. I had $25.47, but I had lots of attitude. I've always been an optimist. I do not tolerate negative. And no matter how tough today is, I know tomorrow will be a better day. Passion. Whatever I do, I give it 150%, even now at nearly 84. And the other one is work ethic, is that I get up, even now, I get up usually at 5:30 in the morning. I always make my bed. I always think I'm late. And so after I was here for 32 years, I went into a bookstore and I picked up a book.
Mm-hmm.
That was in January of 1997. I have the book right here. I don't know why I picked it up. I read the book and I said, oh my God, that's me. Driven to this attraction by Dr. Halliwell. The book is about...
I would share that with you too. I was not an amazing student. I was a passable student. But I sometimes wonder if I had ADHD. I've never been diagnosed with it, but I can tell you there were times, especially when I was younger, where I had a lot of trouble concentrating on things. And I think it affected my ability to be a good student. As I got older, things changed for me. And so I just want to reassure your audience that I am able to write legal briefs and answer emails and get my work done. But I sometimes wonder if I didn't have, some of the same things. So, but I'm sorry, but go ahead and please.
So I read the book. The more I saw in the book, I said, oh my God, that is me. I wrote in the book in Dutch because I was ashamed of it. January 1997, I wrote in that, now I finally know who I am. And so that's what I did. And so now the other part that you may find interesting is...
I can just ask a question real quick.
Yeah.
So does that book provide a way of diagnosing ADHD? I mean, you were able to read the book and then say, okay, this is something that affects me.
There was no question in my mind that I knew. There was no question any time in my mind that I was just as smart, not smarter than, but just as smart as the others. But there was something about me that I did not understand. Obviously, there was ADHD. And so,
right.
and also I was dyslexic. And so, but the package at that point, when I was in school, they said, oh, it's too dumb, it's stupid, and blah, 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 all that negative stuff. I never kind of felt that way, but I felt I will start anew. And so when I found, already when I came in 1965, I was going to build a mill, start with nothing. It took only a year for me to become a superintendent of one of the largest sawmills in Prince George. Then it took me a year and a half to buy a piece of a small company here, of a lumber company, and then start all over again, start a company in 1975 called Brink, the Brink group of companies. And I'm not here to brag about how successful I am. It's not about that. But today we have 10 companies, and all of them are big company, getting bigger and bigger all the time. And so, but it was only in 1997 when I saw this book. It took me 5 years after that before I would go to my doc that had delivered our 2 daughters, was a personal friend, and he said to me, hey John, why are you here? I said, I think I got ADHD. So we did the research on it. Yes, I do.
What did you do? I mean, after you found out that you had ADHD, what did you do to, is there medication or something, or exercises? How did you?
I did, but I believe you would have done. I said, I need to know everything about it. What does it really mean? And is it a mental defect of some sort? Because I was building companies, and as I made proposals to lenders and bankers for millions of dollars, I cannot make a proposal and he said, oh, by the way, I should tell you, I got a mental disorder of some sort. He said, have a nice day. So what I did is I needed to find out everything about it. I did that.
Yeah.
And then I came to the conclusion that it is a superpower. And I believe that deeply. It is a superpower. If people ask me, even today at 84, I'm an author, I'm a speaker, I run 10 different companies, and all that stuff. And I'm a podcaster, a successful one, obviously, and all of that stuff. And people say to me, how do you do that all? I said, ADHD. That's why. So that's how I feel about it. And then, Richard, more than anything, I felt I had an obligation to become more vocal about it. And I did that. I included it in my presentations. I talk about entrepreneurship and all the other kind of things that I talk about. But I always have a small section in there about ADHD. But by the time I'm done with presenting ADHD as it is me, there are a lot of people in the audience that said, I have it too. But there are a number of other people say, damn, I wish I had it too. So the other one is your podcast number 315 on the Brink.
That's a lot of podcasts, by the way. That's you're racking up some pretty good numbers there.
So the one that I was going to give to you is podcast number 203. Is an interesting podcast because it is Dr. Halliwell.
Okay.
That wrote the book in 1993. I bought this in 1997, and I podcasted him 6 months ago, a year ago, and the podcast. And the interesting part about the podcast comes to the question that you asked earlier, is that I said, what I have found, initially I thought before I read the book, maybe 8% of the population ADHD in the world. I thought, no, there is a lot more than that. And so when I had a podcast with Dr. Halliwell, who's an MD, ADHD, dyslexic as well, immensely highly recognized around the world as a success story. So when I talked to him about that, I felt that probably the occurrence of ADHD around the world is probably around 20%. I suggested to Dr. Halliwell. He said, no, John, more than 25%. I agree with him. The other part
is it a genetic disorder, or I mean, how do you get ADHD? Or you're shaking your head. Maybe nobody knows.
I'm convinced. I'm not a doc, obviously, or I don't have any qualification other than me. I was ADHD the day I was born, in my opinion. And then, but maybe added to it, I had PTSD because of the war years, the end of child, and but I was born, in my mind, as ADHD. Now, the other part I was going to mention, Richard, is that because I've been involved in business as you have, I met with a lot of important people in all boardrooms and on and on and on and on. I came to the conclusion, I suggested to Dr. Halliwell, that I believe probably of the successful and the operative and successful entrepreneurs and CEOs, I suggested to Dr. Halliwell, in my mind, 50% of them are ADHD. He said, no, John, 75%. I agree with him.
That makes sense. I mean, there's so many, in my profession, there's so many type A personalities. And in order, I think, to be an entrepreneur, you have to have a lot of energy. And I think part of the work that we do is to distract ourselves from, kind of sometimes the anxious feelings that we get from ADHD or whatever it is, right? And so that's where a lot of the drive comes from, and sort of the need to get things done. So I don't know that much about ADHD now. I'm really interested after talking with you to find out more about it.
I'm going to send you a copy of all my books, all 4 of them. I'm working on another one that is coming out in June. I can show you this on communication skills that are critically important. This will be the outside of that book. It's still in, and I'm still working on it. It will come out next June or July. Actually, by showing you the picture, I now need to acquire a lawyer. I have to get an intellectual lawyer to protect my picture.
you want to protect that. It's a good picture. So,
yeah. But I will get you copies of all the books. I will sign them and send them to you. So, but
I'd be delighted. Thank you.
as you already noticed, I love you as a podcast guest with all your experience and all your background and all the honesty and sincerity, and then obviously you have an amazing background, and I get very excited about that. It's probably my ADHD that does that, but that's how I live, you know.
Well, I mean, you are an inspiration. And I think as I started talking a little bit before the show, I was born in 1960. My birthday is November 5th. So we're almost exactly 20 years apart, right?
Exactly.
And, you're fast kind of becoming a role model for me because I love your energy and your commitment to life, right? And
Exactly.
I've been reading a book lately called "The Breaking the Age Code," and it's about how attitudes can affect aging, and just having the right frame of mind makes all the difference in the world. There was a study that was done where people who had the proper mental attitude toward aging actually lived an extra 7.5 years longer than people who had sort of the more traditional attitudes about aging. And in North America, we have, I would say, sort of a depressing view of aging. If you compare how society treats older people here in the United States, maybe in Canada, to
Same.
how populations, Asian populations, China and Japan treat older people. They have a much higher level of respect for people who have aged. They see them as a source of wisdom. And the number of centenarians who are in those cultures is much higher than it is here in North America because of, to a large extent, because of the way society views elders there as compared to elders here, who are really sort of put off on a track to become kind of decrepit, and they're given all sorts of messages that older people have nothing more to contribute,
Exactly.
and it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. So
I
so you've obviously you've mastered this, and I hope that people pay attention to your message because I think it's very important.
I felt so strongly about it that quality of life is what counts. The age is just a number, but quality of life, that is important. A lot of people in the last decade of their life are falling into the trap of whatever has happened before. They're not treating themselves well. They are on chemicals, hands full of them, and so that's why I felt I had to write a book about that. Living young, dying old, and it's a picture of me. Is that
Who is that handsome guy?
that's how I look today. And I after this podcast, I'm gonna go to the gym, and that's what I do. And in 2018, I qualified for the Arnold's, and then obviously I was the provincial bodybuilding second in bodybuilding and physique. Then qualified me for the nationals, and then for the Arnold's. And so then COVID came, and then now again I'm training at 85 in 2025. I intend to go to the Arnold's, and the reason that I do is simply it motivates me going to the gym, makes me feel good, and I like to have a goal that I work towards. So being healthy and fit to me is critically important, and I take it very serious. But it took me quite a while before I got there, but I'm fit. I want to get to 120.
Well, I'm from your lips to God's ears, right? I think that it sounds like you're doing great, and the quality of life issue is so important too. If you're physically able to move and do things that are engaging, then that makes all the difference in the world. And I have friends who are 63, 64, they're retired, and they're already not as active, and they're wondering what to do with themselves. And I think it's important that they see your example to know what's possible, because too many people are kind of stuck in this old way of thinking.
Yeah, because if you decide that you're too old at 45, 50, 60, whatever it may be, you will be. And if you say to yourself, well, I can't do this because this, that, and the other thing, I said, no. First and foremost, decide, find out who are you, and be at peace who you are is so important. And then stay active. You don't have to become a bodybuilder, or what females are become. Go to shows about that. But you have to stay physically active. Go for a walk. Already you will see results. What's your diet? Like my wife is vegetarian, and I'm 80-20 probably vegan, and so, but I do all the shopping. So if I go to a grocery store, I usually only go in the grocery store on the outside, because on the inside is all the prepared protein foods, and I have no idea what is in it. So in processed food that they have. So I stick with organic vegetables and all of that kind of stuff. And so that's what we have been doing for quite a number of years. And then I don't drink, I don't smoke, and do all the obvious things. I try to stay physically healthy and mentally active. I like podcasting for that reason, and do all those kind of things. And then and have, as I said to you, I get up at 5:30 in the morning. I always think I'm late. I always make my bed. So and even now
I do the same. I make my bed. I get up at 5.
yeah.
And I try to hit the gym. I have some equipment in my basement, so usually by 6, I'm doing my workout. I have a trainer that comes a couple of times a week
Me too.
to just to keep me on track. And that forces me to do something, right? If he shows up, and it's well worth the money. I mean, any effort, any expense that you invest in your health is more than worth it,
And
because
that's why the book. Yeah, I'm simply saying it's not for me to be a bodybuilder. That's not what it is about. I get a trainer because my life is appointments, as yours is, and I always make sure I meet my appointments. So I have to go. I have an obligation to go. And the more I do it, and you probably feel the same, the more I enjoy it. And once you see results, then saying that feels good, I like it, and so that's the right direction for me. To be successful. On the company side, what I do is I have 4 silos. The one silo is lumber manufacturing. I've had the lumber company for 50 years, and the other silo is warehousing. We're probably the largest warehousing company in northern British Columbia, warehousing, distribution, and logistics. The other one is real estate, doing both commercial, residential, commercial, and industrial real estate. Very, very active. All silos are very, very active. All of them will probably double and triple in size in the next 5 years. And then the fourth one is, you like this one, is media. And so the media, very active. I do a lot of podcasting. I do a lot of speaking. I do a lot of writing books. And you like this one, Richard, because I'm going to need you here, is I'm working on a platform. And I want to start it in the next couple of months, and I'm looking for an intellectual international lawyer that I can afford.
Well, well, I don't know if you can afford us, but yeah. Well, we'd be happy to help. Do
Okay.
you ever come to New York, or
No, but I can. Yeah.
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 Well, we should get you on our Passage to Profit radio show.
Okay.
It's a nationally syndicated radio show in the United States. We have 38 radio stations, and we tape in iHeart Studios. I don't know if you're familiar with the iHeart Corporation, but they're a big entertainment
Okay.
company. And we do the taping in these really fancy schmancy,
Oh, wow.
glitzy studios. It's a lot of fun.
They
You
probably
come in.
look at me and they say, where did you find the old guy?
Yeah. Well, we'd love to have you on because I think our listeners would benefit enormously from your message and what you have to offer. So,
I'm going to make
um,
sure that Scott, did you not know that down, Scott? Because we're going to do that. Okay. I'm going to do that.
okay, all right. Well, if Scott, I have Scott's email,
Yeah.
and I can put you in touch with our booking program coordinator, Alicia, and we'll find a time when it's convenient for you
Okay.
to come out and visit us in New York. And you can also go out on the town and enjoy some nice meals and some Broadway shows. It could be a
Have
fun.
they got have you got all vegetable meals and I don't drink? Is that a problem? No, I'm just joking.
Well, you may have to apply for some permits to not drink and not eat, but no, New York is anything you want,
I
and we've been to
yeah.
some vegan restaurants. They're very tasty.
And we do a
Um,
lot of business in the United States, and so and certainly I take you up on that. And the other part about it, very important is this podcast. What day is today? It's Thursday. This podcast will be released tomorrow. We
oh
usually
wow,
release them very quickly, either the same day or within 24 hours. Most
okay,
people
all
don't do
right.
that. We do. And then the other part, it's kind of interesting that showing me my fourth silo. I've been working on that already for quite a while, and I want to start the platform. But we are exactly at the point that you said, start early, develop the plan, and all of that I'm in the process of doing. So, and I will contact you directly, likely in the next week, and saying, okay, as a client, potentially,
Mm,
and saying, this is where I want to go. You may find it interesting, but it's also interesting for our guests because they will see the evolving of social media and going from being a podcaster, the not bragging, but you're very, very popular. So am I. I'm the top 1% globally, and how that can move potentially to much wider on a platform and
yeah,
be
I'm very excited to learn all about it, and we'd be delighted to help you in whatever way we can. So,
Richard. It was an amazing podcast, and for all the guests watching us, is that subscribe to my podcast and Richard's podcast as well. These are the discussions between a professional like Richard Gearhart that is so well informed in regards to so many things on a global level, may not only be intellectual law, but in a general sense, so much experience in his life. If you want to see more of it, give us encouragement, send us comments, share it, with others, like it, and subscribe to us both. Richard, it was a privilege and a pleasure. I'm going to send you the books. I'm going to sign them all for you, and then we'll be in touch with you next week.
thank you so much, John. It was an amazing experience for me, and I wish you and all of your audience the best of luck.
Thank you, Richard. Take care.